And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Nicholas Ingram, who during his near-death experience was able to separate and get free from an entity that had been negatively influencing the trajectory of his life. Nicholas, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Well, Nicholas, I think we might need just a very little bit of backstory before we get into your NDE.
Okay. What specifically?
I'd like to start with the reason why you had the NDE or why you were living a certain lifestyle that led up to it.
So, to give that backstory, I kind of have to go back far, but I'll make it quick. So, when I was very young, I experienced some severe trauma. And that's one thing I kind of notice with people that have these kinds of experiences is a lot of childhood trauma. And what I think that does is it opens us up. It brings more awareness, but at the same time, I think it opens us up for these kinds of attachments to occur. And I didn't realize that until after my NDE, which more than an NDE, I call it a separation event, because that was the experience for me. So I'll go back to my childhood maybe later and talk about some of the patterns that I noticed growing up and throughout my life that also I found in this NDE to be very prevalent and consistent throughout my experiences with these non-physical intelligences. So about a year prior to the NDE, well, 2 years prior, I was in a relationship. And during that relationship, everything started out really good. And then throughout it, I was experiencing more and more interference. It was like the more good things I tried to do to propel my life somewhere positive, I would get so much interference, not just internally, but externally in the world around me. And it seemed like it worked in correlation with each other to just constantly hinder me to the point where I became agoraphobic in a way. I almost couldn't leave the house. I was terrified of what I was seeing because it didn't make sense to me that how could something that seems to be, influencing me mentally also be influencing people around me to create certain events to occur or experiences or interactions. And so basically that relationship failed because I couldn't really function anymore. So after that, I traveled from where I lived in Cincinnati to all along like the southern east coast of the US. I started in North Carolina and then I went through Florida, and I just traveled for about 6 months trying to just recover my mental facilities and get my mind on something different. So I started traveling farm to farm, just trying to learn new skills and towards the lifestyle that I wanted to live, which was off-grid, outdoors, and eventually a community. So I did that for a few months, and I wanted to come home to visit. And on my way home, I totaled my car. A deer jumped out and totaled it. So I eventually did make it back to Cincinnati, and I was just very depressed. It's like every time I tried to do something would happen that would just stop me in my tracks. And I had a sense like this isn't just random occurrences. It almost feels scripted is what I started to notice. Like it just felt like, there were times where I would get deja vu, but like into the future, where I would see like milliseconds into the future, like, oh, I know what's about to happen. How do I know what's about to happen? Why do I know what's about to happen? And I just kept putting all these things together. And eventually it got to the point where I was almost agoraphobic again. And I was staying at my brother's, and he wasn't staying at his house. So he was actually letting me stay there basically rent-free while I got myself together. And I was there for about 3 or 4 months. And the last 2 months, I really started focusing on, what is going on? What is this? And it was October is when I had my NDE. I'd say a month before that is when I started figured out this particular modality of, it was just clearing. And just clear everything that I thought I knew by going within my own mind, within my own core, and really being honest with myself and saying, well, do I really know this, right? To everything, right? The smallest things to the largest things. And I just called it the I don't know work. And I would do that. I did that for about 2.5 weeks of just solitude. Like, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. I just sat there and I cleared everything and tested everything. Like, do I really know this? I don't know if I know that. Okay, so I really don't know it. And I had to get to the point where I wasn't just saying I don't know. I was realizing I don't know that. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what this world is. You know, it got so broad that during that time, the interference became extreme, and it became so apparent that there was something trying to guide me, because this is about when I started using media, TikTok in particular, and I was going on other people's lives, their shows, and just conversing with them and trying to figure out just what is going on here. What is this world? Why is it the way that it is? Like, very broad questions that people assume there's no real answer to, but I was determined to find these answers. You know, I need to know what's going on here, because there seems to be a directive and there seems to be an objective to what we're all experiencing. And at a certain point, the interactions with this non-physical intelligence became so obvious that I started to really consider, okay, maybe this isn't just like a part of my psyche. Maybe this is a separate thing. And it got really dark and really cruel. And the things that it was showing me, it was like trying to torture me, basically, because I mean, that's what it was doing. That was the effect that it was having. And so I went from a state of victimhood, where I was like just constantly afraid, trying to tiptoe around whatever this was, but still trying to figure it out, to angry. And I got really mad, and I was like, okay, whatever this is, it's bullying me. I didn't do anything to deserve this. And I not only do I see it happening to me, but I start noticing like other people are kind of going through the same thing. And I started really listening a lot more to people's near-death experiences. And I just started noticing these patterns, you know, where it almost seemed like good cop, bad cop, you know? And I was like, well, if these beings are really here to help, and even this one that was torturing me kept claiming that it was all for my own benefit, all for my own good. And I just said, you know what, enough's enough. So I started fasting, and I did a juice fast for about 2 weeks. And I ate maybe like a meal every 2 to 3 days. And then things ramped up big time for me. And it started attacking me in my dreams in very obvious ways. And I couldn't go around people at all at that point, because it was like I was seeing the influence of it working through everyone around me. And I said, okay, whatever this is, I can tell it's attached to me, like my psyche, my mind, my soul. I'm not sure, but I need to get it out at all costs. I need to separate from whatever this is. I want to eliminate it, because what it's doing is objectively wrong. It is incorrect in what it's doing, and no being deserves to go through the level of trauma that I'm going through. And I'm assuming at this point that it's putting others through. You know, I'm just looking at the world and I'm comparing notes between my experience and others' experiences. I'm starting to notice like a very what seemed to be scripted path of how things would go. And I got to the point where I was so certain that the only thing that mattered was separating from this thing, that I decided, all right, I'm going to stop eating, drinking, sleeping. I'm going to do nothing but focus on this thing and identifying it and separating from it. And I sat in one chair for about 4.5 days, I didn't, like I said, I didn't eat, sleep, or drink anything. And I just sat and I focused, what is this? You know, and I did deep work in terms of just mental recapitulation of what do I actually know? What don't I know? And the 4.5 day mark, about there, I went to stand up to go use the restroom. And as soon as I stood up, my body collapsed. It collapsed backwards, excuse me. So it collapsed backwards and I'm still standing there. And I feel, the only way I can describe the feeling of this separation was, if like the sunlight that comes through the blinds, if you open the blinds on a window, if you could imagine being that sunlight coming through those blinds as it's being open, that's what it felt like when the separation occurred. So my body's falling backwards. I'm standing there, and I look at myself, and in this mode of perception, it's like I don't have a 360-degree view of everything, but it's a much more expanded view than what we see through the human body. It was like maybe 270 degrees of vision, where I could see my body to my right falling backwards. I'm looking at myself, and it's like I'm golden light, basically. And then as the body's falling backwards, I'm standing there, and it's like it just feels like I'm like ungluing from it almost. And then simultaneously, as that's happening, something comes out of the body, and it was like a black smoke, right? And so this black smoke comes out from my right, and then it forms right in front of me as like a black shadow figure. And I'm seeing this thing, and at this moment I'm having so much clarity that it's like a huge filter was removed from my perception, from my awareness, from my mind. And so this thing forms in front of me. I'm looking at it and recognizing that this is it. This is the thing I've been looking for. You know, this is the thing right here. And then my body hits the chair, and I get sucked back in just instantly. It was such a smooth transition from being out to observing that and then being back in the body, that I almost didn't notice it, because the entire time, as soon as I saw that thing, that entity form right in front of me, I didn't break my focus or intention from it the entire time between being out of the body and being pulled back in. Because as soon as the body hit the chair, it was almost like I was shoved back in. And so I'm sitting here in this chair. My body's like very weak, you know, but at the same time, it feels light and it feels clear. Like there was no longer that voice in my head anymore that was trying to influence me. It was very apparent that that voice that had been in my head was there now standing in front of me. And so that black shadow figure is still standing there in front of me. And instantly it tries to come back in. That's the first thing that happened, is that I can feel it trying to come back in, right? And it's basically saying, let me back in. And I'm like, no, I'm using my intention and my willpower. And it was almost a battle of will, where this thing was pushing on my field, trying to force its way back in. And I'm sitting here just observing it. I'm saying, no, you're not coming back in here. As a matter of fact, you're going to answer some questions. And so this whole interaction with myself and it was basically telepathic, right? It was all happening internally, but I could feel the distinct difference between my internal and then what it was projecting to my internal in order to communicate. So the first thing I asked it is, well, I didn't even ask. It was really a rhetorical question. I said, you're the thing that's been torturing me and sabotaging my life, basically, right? And it was rhetorical. And it knew that I knew the answer already, because it basically just laughed. Like I heard it laugh, kind of snicker, like, yep, that's me, you know, like kind of in a way of like, yep, that's me. What are you going to do about it? And I was just like, okay. And then it tried to come back in, right? I just kept saying, no, you're not coming back in. And I ended up having like a 4.5, 5 hour interaction with this intelligence. And I'm just sitting here and I'm asking it questions. And what I'm noticing at this point is that every time I'm asking a question, the same place I'm asking the question from I'm also receiving the answer pretty much instantaneously. It's like the intention of the question is bringing me the answer, but then this entity in front of me is either telling me the opposite of what I'm now coming to know from my internal, or it's just telling me just a blatant lie. And so finally, after this lengthy interaction with it, I recognized that the only thing that it was going to try to do was reintegrate, right? And I pretty much made it clear that that's not going to happen. And so as soon as I made that intent fully known, right, that there was no circumstance or means where that was going to happen, where I'd let this thing back in, that's when it went to turn to leave. And when it went to turn to leave, it was like a instant knowing, this thing's going to try and find another host now. That's what it's doing. It's going to leave. It's going to find someone else to do the same thing too, and basically parasite off of them. And as soon as it did that, it was like an instinctual thing where I just used my intent, my will, my imagination, and I reached into like the core of it, of this entity. I pretty much froze it in place. Like I was like, no, you're not leaving. And I froze it, and I reached into, it's basically like its solar plexus area. And it was like in that moment, I gathered all the energy in that thing into that one spot, and I grabbed it and I kind of turned it and I pulled it out. It was almost like removing a battery. It came out kind of like a cylinder. And when I pulled it out, I held it for a second, and then I just absorbed it. And as soon as I did that, it like turned to dust basically and disappeared. And that very clear presence of this thing in that moment completely vanished. It was as if it didn't exist anywhere at all after that. So that was the NDE that I call my separation event.
Nicholas, thank you for sharing your experience with us. At this point in your life, do you feel that you're able to keep clear of entity attachments?
It's extremely difficult for me, because it's like everything that society seems to be set up for right now is geared towards the allowance of these things to attach and to populate and to basically, it's like the perfect formula for it to be normalized, this type of parasitic activity, right? It's the environment itself almost seems like it's been skewed and altered in order to allow these things to flourish.
In what ways can we protect ourselves from entities, and should we empower ourselves as well to do that?
That's really why I wanted to come on the show. That's why I do what I do, and the show that I host it's all about self-empowerment. You know, like that's the bottom line of this, is that a lot of us have gone through a lot of things that have really disempowered and diminished, even our view of ourselves. And I think when I go back again to the effect being the purpose, I think there's a formula there for disempowerment. So what I like to provide is a formula for empowerment. And what I've found to be the most beneficial and efficient and effective way of self-empowerment is simple. It's to use your mind, use your faculty, use your being to really identify what is taking my power right now, right? What is disempowering me? What I feel like is draining me? And it doesn't take a physical action. That's the best part about this. It just takes the will, the intent, and the imagination to actually use your mind and use your being to reach out to whatever it is that's disempowering. And it's not a person, right? I never look at a person that I have an experience with as, oh, they did this, or this was their fault, or even my fault. I just look at the situation as, okay, here's a formula. The effect was that it made me feel diminished in some way. I'm now going to use my mind, and I'm going to reach out to that, where that energy has been taken from me and put to, and I'm just going to take it back. And I think that process for everyone that I've interacted with has been very unique to each individual, because we all have our own imagination. We all have our own mind, and we all have our own way of creating as creator beings. So how it is that an individual takes their power back, I think the formula is simple. It's just awareness, right? Being aware of what's taking our power, using our willpower to stand up to it and say no. Some patterns that replay through our lives throughout decades, right? Those become almost like control mechanisms. And to take the power back from that takes sometimes a lot of will, a lot of will and intent and desire to do so. And contrary to what a lot of people say, one of the most empowering things that I've experienced was allowing myself to get angry. Because if I didn't allow myself to get angry, I never would have defended myself against a lot of these entities that did try to come and take my energy and a lot. I mean, I've had a few times where they've outright come and said, just give me your soul and I'll leave you alone. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know that that's really what they want. I don't know that I can know that right now. But what I do know is that by standing up and saying no, and actually trying to take the power back that might have been taken through those interactions, even if they're brief, it's all internal. It's all mental. For me, it's all been very telepathic. And it's all been just a reclamation of my own mind so that I can help others, because I can't help anyone else if I can't get myself to the place where I feel whole,
You have a history of coming in contact with negative entities, but since your experience, have you also been able to come in contact with positive ones like angels?
No, actually, surprisingly not. But I would say also yes, because the positive entities, the most benevolent force I see in this world is beings like you and I, where we're just trying to get to the truth, right? And I think we have good intentions for why we want the truth, because I think there's something in us that knows that the way things are is not the way things have to be right now in this world, and that we have so much potential to create whatever we want. Yeah, I just think that it doesn't make logical sense that there wouldn't be something trying to prevent us from creating the utopia that I think we would create on our own if left to our own devices, if that makes sense.
What is the name of your YouTube channel and what kind of videos are you posting there?
Okay, my name is Disobey AD, and I basically talk about how to disobey that influence, right? That influence that tries to convince us that it's there to protect us or to guide us in a way that's positive, when from my perspective, I know what's good for me better than any external source does, right? And I just want to see everyone become empowered. And I think for that to happen, we have to get used to the idea of disobeying the environment, both sometimes internally and externally,
Before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
Yeah, absolutely. You are the power. If you're a being that has imagination, compassion, empathy, you're the most powerful thing in this world. Absolutely, hands down. And that's really all you need to know, is that you are the power, and you have every right to say no to anything that is taking from you, that you don't want to give your energy to.
Nicholas, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff, so much. Thank you for the work you do, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.